do, I would love to introduce our closing panel. So a big theme of DevRelCon has been how AI is impacting not just developers, but also the work of developer relations folks. And we've brought together a group of who I think are some of the leading sort of like platform builders and community builders in this space to talk about what is actually going on and how this is going to change the future of our work together. Our moderator for this panel is a longtime DevRel expert, Nikita Jotwani, who has a storied history at Twilio and is now principal developer advocate at HubSpot. And then our panelists will be joining us are Shashank Goyal, who is the founding engineer at OpenRouter, Kaylin Barnes, who is the co-founder and CEO of Gauge, which helps companies show up more in AI answers. So that was a big theme of some of the keynotes yesterday. And then last but not least is Nick Bauman, who is the product marketing manager at Cline, which is an open source AI coding agent. So let's give them all our maybe second to last, penultimate DevRelCon standing ovation and welcome them to the stage.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? How's DevRelCon working out for you all? Awesome. Well, I'm Nikita. I'm a developer advocate at HubSpot. Super excited to be here with all of you today to have a conversation on a 360 view of AI DevRel. I've been working in DevRel for about 10 years, but despite that, very much feel like a junior in comparison to all of you sitting in the audience over here. But I think that none of you would disagree with me if I were to say that DevRel over the years has had this very stable playbook, right? And I think that we're at this age right now where this playbook is being destabilized. And we're all sitting here scratching our heads trying to figure out what the heck do we do and how the heck do we adapt to this playbook. AI is literally changing the game, right? Our old channels are fading right now, and SEO is basically just confusing, dying, unreliable, and we're just not being able to figure out the ROI. And now we have this new generation of native AI developers who are basically just rewriting the way they learn and build. And so seems like a very seismic shift and probably one of the most significant changes that we've seen in DevRel over the years. And I think we brought all of you together today, Shashank, Nick, and Kaylin. Jeez. We just met, okay, so. Because you're doing something, you're not necessarily just, reacting to this change, you're actually rebuilding this future. I wanted to actually just kind of dive into, start out by just like sharing a little bit about yourself with us, what you're building right now, what's your experience been with DevRel so far, and most importantly, who are the developers that you're building for? So we'll start with you, Nick.
Hello, my name is Nick. So I lead product marketing at Cline. So Cline, as mentioned, is an open source coding agent. In my day-to-day, it's really just about kind of teaching developers about how to use AI to code, which is something that's new to everybody. So we're kind of like, we're learning on the fly and then sharing that with everybody. In terms of like as a company, what we think about is really just pushing these models to the limits. They're getting better, and as they get better, we need our product to kind of meet them where they're at. And kind of more broadly speaking, as it relates to DevRel, we're realizing there's space in the market to be kind of experts in the industry. This is, again, a really, really nascent space, and we see the opportunity for us to kind of communicate to you developers what AI coding really means and how they can embrace it. So we're trying to figure out that ourselves. How do we communicate this? How do we become kind of an authority in the space?
Thanks, Nick. Hey, everyone. My name is Shashank, and I'm building OpenRouter. I don't know how many of you guys have seen it, but OpenRouter is a unified model gateway for you to be able to use any model that's on the market. We are really proud that as soon as there's a new model, it's available on OpenRouter. One of the ways that we have been thinking of AI is it's like a very dynamic space. There's a new model, new apps, new modalities every single day. And so our goal is to make it as seamless as possible for new developers, companies, to integrate those models. And for DevRels especially, we actually highlight apps that are building through OpenRouter and using the different models on the platform. So it's been a really cool way for apps to showcase, and as they climb up the rankings, just like get free marketing from our website just by using OpenRouter. So would definitely recommend you guys to check out like our /rankings page, and you'll see all the top apps building in AI right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Shashank. I'm Kalen. I'm a co-founder, CEO at Gauge, and we help companies and brands show up more in AI answers. And so I've actually been a developer for over a decade, and one of the things that we found with our product is that it's like DevRel folks are actually incredible partners for us, because developers are kind of one of the most AI native customer bases out there. And so we're working with folks at Posthog, at SourceGraph, at a number of really, really great dev tool companies to help them basically drive understanding and adoption of their tools through AI.
Awesome. Question for you, Kalen.
Yeah.
You were talking about discovery, and we were talking about the old playbook. We're seeing that this old playbook that we've got for developers, like it includes things like blogs and ads and tutorial and like the traditional SEO, and that's all dying right now. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Your work at Gauge is all about. So what would you say? What would be your advice for DevRel teams to think about discovery in the first place? Like developers are probably not going to Google; they're probably going to ChatGPT right now. So what would be your advice there?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy to see kind of like for the first time in probably about 2 decades, traffic from Google actually declining overall over kind of every industry we're tracking, every customer base, not just developers, but the corresponding rise in usage for ChatGPT models, AI agents, and the way that people are adopting these tools is absolutely exploding. And so really thinking about AI as this new stakeholder that you are writing content for, that you are effectively pitching your product to, is incredibly, incredibly important. And some of the things that we see work really, really well are tailoring your content to be significantly more conversational, as well as really focusing on a lot of kind of off-site strategy. So still doing blog content and all of those things. SEO is actually still quite important. I think when people say SEO is dead, it's true to some sense, but a lot of it is actually changing, where the way that models search the web is now kind of what's important, and the way they do that is very different than how humans do. And so optimizing your content for that, as well as kind of a bigger focus on a lot of community content through very specific channels that LLMs like, at least currently. And I think we see a lot of shifts kind of coming in the future, but some initial thoughts there.
That makes sense. What about adaptability? So now, like, you've got the content, but then it's a DevRel team. Like, things are changing on a regular basis. Docs are changing. Messaging is changing. How do you adapt to that?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges I think a lot of the DevRel teams we work with, are facing, which is, you've done all the work to get your content recommended by LLMs, and LLMs are kind of surfacing your tool, and you're kind of present. You have that visibility, but you maybe launch a breaking change to your SDK, or you change your pricing. How do you make sure that the LLM has up-to-date content? And it's kind of funny, like right now especially, it's very much you have to explicitly tell the LLM, right? So for a user, it's kind of implicit when they come to docs and are looking at the most recent version, that's the most recent version. For an LLM, that's not actually obvious. So even saying things like, this is the latest version, and then adding to all your kind of like previous versions of docs that are all hosted, like this version is deprecated, adapting that kind of conversational method of delivery of information into all of your content, as well as going to Reddit and GitHub threads and kind of all the different places where that content might be fetched from or surfaced, and updating that as well is really important.
We were chatting earlier, and you were talking a little bit about how Reddit is still one of the biggest sources.
100%. Yeah, Reddit is driving a huge amount of information, and something that's also kind of interesting is the LLMs are relatively unsophisticated at the moment in terms of how they retrieve content, and so we actually see a lot of really old content on Reddit driving a lot of value for LLMs. And so, one thing you can actually do is kind of make sure you have coverage not only of kind of the recent living community stuff that that humans are seeing that's kind of getting put out there, but you're actually going back and updating kind of the entire corpus of information that exists out there about your company.
Can I ask, what are some of the other sources?
Yeah, so surprisingly, dev.to is a huge source. Medium is another really, really big source. One that's much harder to influence but is a massive source is Wikipedia. And first-party engagement with Wikipedia is a little dicey, but those are some of the sources we see drive a lot of value for LLMs.
That's very helpful. I'm going to stick to content, and Nick, I've got a question for you. We've been seeing developers sort of like skip the docs like we were just discussing and go straight to an AI assistant for their dev environment, whether it's MCP or just context. But that assistant is probably just working off of old data and just maybe giving them a broken hello world. So what would be your suggestion on how DevRel teams can think about influencing these new channels to ensure that developers are still getting accurate and up-to-date information about their APIs through tools like Cline?
Yeah, it's actually kind of similar to what Galen is saying about curating this content for LLMs. One thing that is really popular among people who use AI coding assistants is this MCP server. If you don't know what MCP servers are, they're basically tools for coding agents. But there's the MCP server called Context7, which is essentially just up-to-date docs for LLMs. As you're probably aware, LLMs have a kind of defined knowledge cutoff date, so anything that's post-dating that will not be included in their knowledge. So you can really submit your docs to Context7 such that anything you create is up to date and available to the LLMs for people using them. Then you mentioned docs. I wouldn't totally discount docs yet. You can, docs, I think maybe for humans aren't super valuable, but where we're going, but as context for LLMs, they're really, really useful. If you have like API documentation, like I just copy and paste that into like the chat box with Cline, and that's really useful. And you can even format this to be specialized for LLMs. There's this format called LLMs.text, and you can basically have like a copy for coding agent in your docs. So I think it's less like docs aren't relevant. It's just that docs are for a different consumer. It's for the LLM. So it's really about curating that information that is still really valuable, but it's less for humans, more for LLMs.
That makes sense. Shashank, the model and app leaderboard page for OpenRouter is practically goldmine. In a world where things are literally shifting daily for DevRel, and we have to make these tough calls on a regular basis that we were just discussing, what to focus on, what to support, what to integrate with. How do you think we should be using all of this data that we now have access to through OpenRouter to navigate all of the hype and be able to sort of like cut through the noise and make like more smarter strategic decisions regularly?
Great question. And a great answer, Nick and Kaylin. I think for DevRel people especially, I think we have to realize that people are still reading docs, but really the audience is changing totally. Most devs are not going to be like manually opening our docs. It's like So models can be they can consume a lot of verbose information. So it's just having as much information in your docs, but for the LLM, super useful. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Token counts are going up over the board, so models are just like consuming and generating so much content, and it's like, how do we stay on top? How do we continue to have high quality content, but geared to a different audience? And this is some of the stuff that you can see on OpenRouter, on our rankings. Every single week there are new models. Last week, Grok 4 and Kimi K2, two brand new models launched, and like have totally changed the shape of the ecosystem. There's like two new players. Grok has been around, but they were not really competing at the frontier. But now Grok 4 is like the best model at a number of different use cases. And similarly, Kimi K2, another Chinese lab, just released a model. So as people who are in the space, it's very important, even if it doesn't directly relate to the things that we do day to day, what's happening, what models are coming out, where is the development happening, and it's so dynamic that it's important to stay on top. So definitely like OpenRouter, we try to make an empirical benchmark, like who are the people that are using these models, how are they using them, and you can find a lot of that information. And the other thing we really like to do is we like to showcase apps that are building using these models. So on OpenRouter, you can see a global app ranking page where like, here are the top 20 apps that use OpenRouter. Or you can go into a model like Kimi K2 and be like, a new model launched this week. What are the top 20 apps that are using this model? What use cases are they using them for? And we've seen Cline is one of the apps that's been like #1 on our leaderboard for many months now, and we actually see that we drive a lot of engagement and direct referral traffic to their website. So it's another way for people to like find tools as they come up, and in a dynamic space. It's like all real-time stats. So definitely explore it, talk to your teams, and see if we can be an advertising board for you guys.
That's really awesome. But beyond just picking the top model on your leaderboard, what would you say is like a more nuanced insight that DevRel teams could probably pull from your rankings?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like directly clear from our rankings, but like a second order effect of all the new models that are coming out is that it's like a very overused word at this point, but I think the future is agentic, which basically means that it's not a single question answer kind of flow that most people are engaging with. It's like you ask a question and the model goes and uses a bunch of tools in the background and does multi-step flows internally before it outputs a response to you. So the models that are becoming the best now are models that are like trained and really like RL'd for specifically using tools. If that doesn't make a lot of sense, it's basically like there's going to be a certain class of models that are going to be specifically really good at agentic things, and those models are coming out now and are going to really like take over. And so as DevRel people, again, just like going to the rankings, you'll kind of start to see this stuff. And we'll be adding categories soon. So if you're like focusing on SEO, we have a category to say that, hey, for SEO, what models are people using? For like programming, what models people are using? For tool use, what models are people using? So things like that, you can like dive in a little bit deeper.
For content too.
Yeah, for content writing, role play, tonality, we have a bunch of languages. So there's like a lot of like different ways you can slice the data on OpenRouter.
That's very cool. And Shashank and Kaylin, feel free to jump in if you have.
Yeah, one thing actually that comes to mind is, we've been tracking AI written content as a subset of the content that we see do well for AI for quite a while. And if you talked to me like 3 months ago, I would say basically you should not be writing your content with AI. It's fine, like, content outline, plan, draft, but you really need a human in the loop. We maybe in the past month or two have seen that change where AI content is actually ranking very well and kind of performing very well. You still kind of need to be following best practices when it comes to that. Ahrefs did a big study on this recently, but that's been a big shift. I think that the models have kind of crossed this chasm from, this is clearly AI slop to this is, content that actually can drive value for LLMs, I guess, in this case. But
I think just kind of just kind of double clicking on that point. I completely agree. I mean, most of the content, I'll share this. Most of the content I write is with LLMs, just in terms of like efficiency and quantity, which is helpful for us. It makes that possible. And I would say, yeah, it's less about, just letting AI write your content. It's more, you still need to be really, really clear and like crystallized with what you're communicating. But in some ways, I think AI writes better than I do, so it works out pretty well.
Yeah, it definitely writes better than I do.
That's not true.
Nick, I'm going to stay with you for a second. I want to talk to you a little bit about educational content. So we're about to double the number of software engineers globally in a very short period. I mean, don't quote me on it, but I was reading this somewhere that there are approximately 26.9 million professional software engineers globally as of right now. We're anticipating 47.2 by 2025, and then 62.5 million by 2030. Like, that's wild. And so what would be your advice on how DevRel teams can adapt their educational content so it's more easily and correctly consumed by AI assistants? Because like right now, a broken example from an AI assistant it's a major roadblock for these developers.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think just off the top, thinking about not even for just coding systems, but for humans, I think that there are a lot of like non-developers on platforms that are not generally where only developers are. I know Twitter is a bit mixed, but like we've done really well on Twitter by making really, really crisp, short videos that people can understand what feature it is or whatever we're showcasing in like 3 to 5 seconds. That's really important for us. In terms of that content being ingestible for LLMs, one thing that I would think about, this kind of ties to like docs, but if you have like an SDK or something, what previously would have been documentation, I would lean on rules files actually these days. These are files that are essentially, whether using Cursor or Cline or whatever tool, they're appended to the system prompt of these tools, and they're basically able to guide them through whatever operation that they need to do. I think there's a lot of opportunity in really leaning into that. And that's something we see actually a lot of people do. And they kind of prescribe these to be used like with Cursor or Cline.
Anything you want to add there, Kalen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, in terms of the kind of like rapid expansion of developers and then people moving on to these platforms, something that is pretty interesting as a second order effect is this like system prompt question, and a number of tools, I think we were talking about this just before, have actually kind of started fighting over trying to get into the system prompt as a method of distribution. That's something that there's been a bit of a shift onto, where prior to models having web search tools, there was almost this kind of calcification around the existing data that was out there that was being trained on with the training cutoff date. But now that all of these tools, kind of like coding agents included, are searching the web, it's back to this kind of competitive landscape for developer mindshare. But kind of like new definition of a developer, right? With Lovable, Bolt.new, like all of these platforms that are just growing massively, kind of does require a pretty large shift in who you're targeting with your content, for sure.
Yeah, just really quickly to add, I think 47 or 65 million developers is definitely on the, I think, very conservative side, because what Kalen just pointed out, if Lovable and Bolt become big, we're talking about like 1 billion developers that are building apps, and that's how you really have to think about the future. Like, there's obviously going to be a software engineering profession, but I think the majority of people that are going to be using dev tools are going to be non-coders. And so really, how do we build for them? And I think the thing that keeps coming to me is like, how do you as a dev tool become the default for whatever niche you're targeting? Because the model is only going to recommend one tool and use that one tool in its building. So I think there is going to be a lot of like consolidation at the top, and it is going to like a lot of like the top, there's going to be a long tail, but you really, really need to focus on how do I get to be the default. And then I think everyone needs to think about like, you need to be using these dev tools yourself regularly so you can kind of stay on top of how the landscape is shifting.
That makes sense. Yeah, I feel like you just opened a whole new can of worms. Okay, this is going to be I'm going to throw this out to you.
I think we might have to start Q&A.
Are we ready for Q&A? Sure, I can skip this. Okay, I'm going to go with this.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a spinny question. So we talked about the DevRel playbook. We talked about our blogs and SEOs and content and everything. Tell me, what do you think is going to be in the graveyard, and what AI native strategy is going to take its place? It's okay if you think nothing.
Yeah, I think, right now there's still like a lot of similarities in terms of the surface areas that we're tackling to provide kind of information, whether it be to humans or LLMs. We see a lot of that just becoming more and more agentic over time, where you as a company, in communicating to if maybe the primary consumer of your software is like no longer individuals, it's these agents, there being this almost like agent to agent communication layer, which has this like fundamental tension between if I'm a developer or I'm trying to build something, my agent is ideally trying to be truth-seeking and find the best solution for me. All the company's agents are trying to be that number one agent or convey that they're the best, kind of software. So the transparency around that becomes, I think, very, very interesting. And I think a lot of the, content and those pieces goes away in exchange for kind of this like agent-to-agent layer. Right now, that's definitely not true, but we're seeing some early signs of this where people are using agents to do research. Sales is a huge one right now, where there's all these kind of like sales-based agents that go out there and do all of these things. But pricing, discovery, a lot of these things are becoming more and more agentic and less human-driven.
I think what comes to mind for me is long-form video. It's a question of like, do I need to know how to like set up this curate orchestration, or does Cline just need to know that? And so what a lot of like Cline users will do actually is they'll, like, if there's not a good if there's not a good documentation on something, which again, documentation as like text is useful context, but they will like take a YouTube transcript and give that to Cline rather than watching the video themselves. I think this gets back to, again, like tutorials, whatever. It should be optimized for the agent, and the human doesn't necessarily need to know the details, but the agent still does.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought of long-form video, but yes, now I'm kind of like reevaluating all the Loom videos that I have to go through on a regular basis.
I think really, really short stuff is good for humans, but long stuff it's less efficient.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we can open this up for questions.
Yeah.
If anyone has a question, raise your hand and we will run over. Rob.
This is a question for Nick and Shashank. I was trying to find on my phone, I think I'm right, but I might be wrong. I think both of your Discord servers are larger than the largest Discord server for Mario Kart World. That is a massive moderation challenge. I think we're seeing the very first developer tools companies draw audiences that are consumer-sized. How are you guys approaching that?
Not gracefully, but I know we have moderators. Like we have people on the team that help with this, but we also have moderators that we've hired. We've got Juan Pop in the team, which cannot wait for his help on that. I don't know. I'm curious what Shashank does.
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces. There's moderation, and like people are abusing or spamming. We did our fundraise announcement like 3 weeks ago, and as soon as we did that, we had like crypto airdrop miners like coming into our Discord by like the tens of thousands. So that was a challenge to figure out who are real users and who are people that are just trying to like message in Discord because they think that'll get them an airdrop at some point. But for us, like the really even bigger challenge than like moderation for abuse has been to the amount of like help and feedback requests that we get. We're still a really small team. It's like 14 people, 2 people that work on support, and we're getting about like 80 questions a day across Discord, email, Twitter, and a few other channels that we have. So really, like, how do we make that much more like automated? How can any questions that have been answered in our community that they get auto answered, or can we go to like pull from our docs and then answer immediately? How do we build direct automation on our support channel? So if someone asks for a refund and it's like should be automatic, we can do that. So like really building tools around support has been like a really big focus for the company.
Hey, Jim Bennett. I work for an AI company. I'm a big AI cynic. Now, one thing we've seen across the web is the enshittification of content, if you pardon my language. Yeah, we've got SEO optimized blog posts that are designed to feed the algorithm. We've got ads. It's all about how much capitalism can I extract out of the internet at the expense of the experience. Thank you. Now, the next obvious frontier for this is the enshittification of AI. So I don't know whether, Kaylin, whether you're the best person to think about this, but how are we going to avoid the situation where people create content to game the AI algorithms for the sake of money, and then you end up maybe in a situation where you have a bidding war for, you're going to surface my tool. I think it was one of you was saying that, yeah, you need to be the default tool. Well, is the default tool the person who hands over the most amount of money? So how do we get away from this idea that everything is driven purely by capitalism and we actually drive it by what the user is trying to get?
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. There's a great blog post on Hacker News called "The Librarian Tries to Sell You a Vuvuzela." I don't know if anyone read that, but it was effectively, the analogy was, you're in this like incredible library with all of the knowledge in the world, and you're trying to learn about musical instruments, and on your way there, someone basically stops you and harasses you, and it's pretty scary to think about, because the interactions that you have with an LLM are significantly subtler than the interactions you have with something like, say, Google. So I don't actually have a good answer in terms of exactly what we can do about this and where this goes. There's also, there's dead internet theory, and there's also kind of this very asymmetric challenge right now that's happening with content on the internet, where publishers, people who create original content, are effectively all dying because they require traffic to generate revenue, and traffic is just tanking. The thing that we do definitely see happening is a little bit of a split along the kind of like monetization of this content. So right now there are no ad experiences. You can kind of consider your ChatGPT or kind of experience with models to be relatively pure. We have it on very good authority that that's going to change. So you'll start seeing kind of paid experiences in all of these platforms. There's a huge kind of like funding problem with, there's a huge like capital problem where there's been a huge amount of money put in, and that does have to come out at some point. And that will almost, I think, we'll see something very similar to what happened with Google, where you have paid search, and that's a channel that you're optimizing for, and you'll have organic search, and that's a channel you're optimizing for. That's definitely going to happen to AI. But there's definitely a larger philosophical question there that I don't have a great answer to, but it's a very interesting question.
Just to add, I think there's a lot of cynicism that I, being in the space, also have. Like, it's just like when the speed of development becomes so fast that someone that's like on Twitter every day is trying to read papers every day, it still doesn't feel like I can ever catch up. And I think what will happen is hopefully the agents get so good that we don't have to worry about like a huge class of problems. And then the real thing is that we'll optimize for time outside of the digital space. So I feel like the pendulum is swung so far into this like digital world that humans will basically be like, I'm going to optimize for how much time I don't interact with AI, I don't spend digitally, and those we might like see basically a return to physical spaces, and like we might start valuing that more. And I don't think that you can really take capitalism out of AI or like tech or the internet, because that's like what drives the economics.
Hi, Erin from another AI company. Been in the AI space for about 4 years and have a master's degree in actually the business of content. That's all that aside. Most interesting question I have about this is, how do you measure, like you guys mentioned the funding announcement, and then you got like a bajillion people in the Discords, like, I've been there, done that, it sucks, it's hell. How do you actually capture a return user? Because I'm finding with a lot of AI tools, even myself, like I've actually used Cline, but like the number of tools I go back to is about 1/10 of the tools I try. So how do you convert from someone being like, this is a cool thing I tried once, to the ongoing? Like, this is a cool thing I try it again and again and again.
It's a question we're trying to figure out, honestly. There are so many tools, there's so many tools entering the space. This might be a cop-out, but I think just building a really great product, that's what we focus on. Obviously, if that was really simple, everybody would do it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like you got it. Like there's no other answer than a good product. Like at the end of the day, you can do $10 million of marketing and go to all the events and like buy every billboard. But if your product isn't good, then you can't. Exactly what you said, right? Your marketing can get you that like first impression, but the second, third, fourth are fully dependent on the product that you build. So really, like if your conversion rate isn't good, people are bouncing a lot. It's like trying to figure out what are you missing, talk to those users, and I think it's like much more empirical.
Is there a percentage, like how much do you spend on focusing on a new user versus a returning user? What percentage at this point, or is it still figuring this out?
For us, I think we spend almost all of our time thinking about the people that are already using our product versus bringing in new users.
I think it depends who you are. Like, our product team is thinking about existing users. My entire focus is on new users. So it's everything.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. Going once. Going twice. Okay, Swift.
So you guys are all steeped in this AI space and are probably, I mean, every one of us is struggling with staying up to date on the best tools to be using and the best resources. Can you just share one of your favorite tools that most people in the audience may not have heard of as far as just the work that you're doing every day for your products, and then maybe your favorite source for staying up to date on the latest stuff going on in the AI space as well?
I think my favorite tool is there's this Perplexity MCP server. I use Cline. I'm not trying to plug Cline, but I use Cline for a lot of what I do. But this Perplexity MCP server makes it really easy to just get research and context into whatever I'm doing. And in terms of staying up to date, unfortunately, it's Twitter, which is extremely distracting, but it is where the new stuff is.
Yeah, we were just chatting about it right before this, but I think the tool that's really changed a lot, like of how I interact with the real world, is like Granola. It's just like a note-taking app that sits on your computer or your phone, and it like you can just start taking notes for anything, like Slack huddles, Meets, Zoom, etc. Doesn't matter what you're taking a meeting on. It's super useful. You get a full transcript. You get notes. You can ask questions about like, hey, I had this meeting last week. What date did we decide? And it just tells you. And then for staying in like on top of the news, definitely like Twitter is the best source. I've also found we like get so many customer inbounds. We directly reach out to so many CEOs, founders, builders on Twitter, and people are surprisingly responsive. So it's been a really great channel to like meet people and talk to people as well.
Awesome. For us, our team recently has been playing around a lot with AMP, which is SourceGraph's new agent for coding, and the multi-threading, especially if you're like trying to run parallel processes, has been really, really cool. And then for news, yeah, I probably spend too much time on Twitter and LinkedIn, but Hacker News is a higher quality source if you can, spend time there too. Try to.
It's what I fall asleep to every night is Hacker News.
Yeah.
Fun words to end on. The stuff of nightmares. Okay, let's give our panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you guys so much. And thank you, Nikita, for being a fantastic moderator.